How did NRG almost shock the world? This is a question I've been trying to ask myself since the Grand Finals in Stockholm. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Coach Cuffy, head coach of Shikigami, as well as Team Gambit over in EU. And if you still don't know me after that description, I was the guy that was Fletcher's assistant coach. But before I get carried away speaking about me, I want to go a little bit deeper into the opening question. Was NRG's success down to their skill, their preparation, or perhaps was it just luck? NRG has a good roster, right? Top 4 seems fitting. I mean, after all, they do have the Dark Lord Daddy. PGE. But in order to get a definitive answer to these questions, we have to strip back everything and start at the very beginning of OWCS Stage 4. As we know, Toronto Defiant is the strongest team in North America, something that's been the case for over a year now and something their owners constantly like to remind us of. Then on top of this, according to most people, Nightmare were the second best team in the region. But that third seed slot was completely up in the air. Anyone could grab it. I remember receiving some creative DMs saying that Shikigami could come first place after we took 2 maps from Toronto Defiant. But hey, that was just people getting excited that we showed that the Giants could bleed. Shikigami aside, the teams that were the true front runners were probably TSM, Fluffy Aimers, and NRG Shot. 2 teams that did have very consistently good results, and another team that was very much up and coming. My personal opinion on the matter was that Fluffy, the up and coming team, were probably in the strongest state. But the TSM roster were proven to be very strong with very strong coaching. As you guys know, TSM beat Fluffy Aimers in a very close map 5. But then TSM went on to lose against Nightmare in the game after. If TSM won that game, they would have qualified. However, NRG Shot, who lost against Fluffy Aimers very early into the lower brackets, built up enough circuit points in the previous seasons to go ahead and play. NRG had qualified by the skin of their teeth, and they did not look very strong. To make things worse, the upcoming Mauga meta seemed very EU pilled, or so we thought. Back in the day, Europe were running a very brutish variation of Mauga comp. To put things simply, we see you, we run at you, we kill you. Even the hero picks that we saw alongside it was super high damage like Reaper Bastion with super high heals like Moira and Kiriko. Yep, I know exactly what you're thinking. These characters don't go well together at all. But you see, you thinking that sentence right there in your head did not stop the comp from killing 5 people every single fight. The comp was strong, but it was also based completely on their scaling, their damage output, their heal output. And with comps like these, they do get outclassed when people get a stronger understanding of the matchup and adapt it to be more technical. The issue with the Mauga comp on release was that it had too many characters that got way too much value in the early fight and not a lot of value later on in the fight. If we look at Mauga, Bastion, Reaper, Moira, Kiriko going into a fight, they have a bunch of utility, super strong abilities, and the potential to ruin your day. But then as near as 10 seconds into the fight, Mauga's already charged in, used his shout, Bastion's used turret form, Reaper's got shot and has had to Wraith out, Moira's used all of her heals because her team are turbo feeding, has also had to fade out, and Kiriko committed to Suzu to help out with this. Every single one of these cooldowns being forced impacts either their survivability, their ability to deal damage, or their ability to heal over a certain course of time. Kiriko being probably the only character that's still playable 20 seconds into a fight. It didn't take long for coaches like me to realize something like this. So we swiftly replaced the DPS picks with characters like Ashe, Soj, Sim, Pharah that could deal equal amounts of damage regardless of the phase of the fight. And yes, I know I use Moira as a visual example, but of course teams were still running Lucio over Moira quite a lot, so we just kind of leaned into that a bit more. So now that we've got the history out of the way, let's talk about the modern day. Because I haven't heard anyone comment on the fact that we're still operating on those fundamentals that we discovered almost a year ago. Look at the DPS that most teams are playing right now. If that Echo is positioned correctly, her flight and her stickies do not change how survivable she is. So just like the Ashe, just like the Soj, the Sim, the Pharah, she would be a character that is not bad in a long-lasting fight. And this was proven to be true across the grand finals. The team that ended up winning these longer fights were the teams whose Echo lived the longest. Like, I'm not even joking, I remember watching certain fights where one team's Reaper died instantly and one team's Echo died instantly, and it was the team whose Reaper died first that ended up winning. But speaking of Reaper, why have we decided to play Reaper again once we already established to move away from him? Well, I don't want to get caught up on the technicalities, but Brig is played more like a Moira than she is like a Lucio. So Brig's group sustain plus focus sustain actually makes Reaper a stronger character, even stronger than he was paired up with the Moira back in the day. So this modern day aspect of a super tanky Reaper was actually heavily influenced by the first ever variation of the Mauga comp. But is this a weakness or a strength? Twisted Minds seemed to go against the mold, running a variation of Mauga comp that involved a hit scan and also a Pharah. A lot of people put this down to the fact that they had Quartz on Ashe and Lubda on Pharah. And yes, if I did have Quartz and Lubda in my team, we would also be on Ashe Pharah. But where I really think they benefited was the fact that it's a unique comp in comparison to what most people ran, but still with a DPS pairing that benefited greatly at those longer fights. Whether it was an objective counter, great hot swaps based on team comfortability, or simply a matchup that enemy teams played far less, we saw that enemies struggled significantly into this. But why exactly is Twisted Minds being brought up in a video clearly about NRG? Well, just like NRG, Twisted Minds was the 3rd seed in their region. Of course, the slightly harder region where individuals are drastically more handsome, more intelligent, and funnier, and more genuine. But a 3rd seed team nonetheless. But my point is, it was no coincidence that the two teams that were widely considered to be the worst 2 teams in the tournament were able to so consistently outplay some of the best teams in the world. Again, not even joking, my EU team, Team Gambit, were in the same groups as Twisted Minds. And as a top 16 team in the region, we were even saying, this game is winnable. And let me tell you one thing, life changes so fast because I was sitting down in Stockholm thinking Team Falcons are frauds. Like, I know Quartz is younger, but has anyone double checked to see if he's not Proper's dad? On a serious note, Falcons were not the only team on my fraud watch. NRG was right there next to them. Bro, the way Crazy Raccoon were moving to shock. Like, it's like watching a puppy get beaten. And I saw them swapping, I saw them looking for it, but I thought they had lost their minds when I saw them on the Queen. I thought they were only on it because they were getting rolled the way that they were. Mainly because it's an easier matchup all round than the Mauga mirror into a good team. Plus, it's way more forgiving. There's just something so unbelievable about an NA team having the depth to step away from meta and outthink teams in any other region. But I must have forgotten that Wheats is the GOAT. Tell me how I watched an entire series of Overwatch where a team ran Queen permanently and I still went into this second game thinking, I think this team plays Mauga. But then they dunked on End, sticking on the Queen, and it dawned on me, these guys are quite good at the video game. You see, Tree confirmed at the end of that second match versus Ents, right? He said, we will be playing the Queen, and now teams know that. And I swear to God, you should have seen the smile on my face. You see how I previously explained that Mauga comp excels in very short fights? Well, Queen plays extremely similarly, but if you think about it, the way that she sustains herself, these axes, these knives, yes, it heals her up way less in comparison to Mauga, but the sustain is way more reliable and way more prolonged over a course of time. And because Queen comp can play with a wide range of damage heroes, it gave NRG the option to lean into more survivable heroes, or better yet, completely match the enemy team's pick. This meant that Kellen could completely focus on the tank line matchup, surviving Mauga's hit and probably winning the fight based off of DPS. As you can see, the DPS lineup that NRG decided to run was Echo Sombra, and if we were to slot these DPS picks into the roles that I stated earlier, Sombra provides that front line pressure through her hack, as does Echo, but same with the Mauga mirror, the Echo plays as the win condition in the longer fight. At first glance, the comp looks clunky, but we need to remember that Mauga comp is a comp that relies heavily on ult cycles. If you see the way that any of these teams are playing, whether that's Team Falcons or Toronto Defiant, all of them are using their ults in the exact same way, saving our rally for Reaper ult or Cage, or potentially copying an enemy Reaper so we can double Reaper ult the enemy. So running this DPS line meant that NRG could Queen ult every single one of their Juno ults, bash every single one of their Reaper ults, copy every single one of their Mauga ults, and if they didn't have enough ults to match, they could just EMP the whole thing, essentially making it unreasonably easy. But sadly, in life, every single empire has its downfall. And even if NRG's empire only lasted around 2 games, they made Toronto work for their win. The Queen comp wasn't an unkillable machine. If Mauga was able to stomp her into the ground within the first 5 seconds of the fight, then the Mauga comp would win. And there was a certain someone that understood this more than others. And that certain someone was someone. I'll be honest, I just said that to set up a joke. Instead, someone decided to lock Zarya. Yep, it's a very ranked mentality, but it's effective and it worked. Like I said, in this comp, Queen only needs to focus on winning her tank matchup. So why don't we just play a tank that stops her from being able to win her tank matchup? Zarya's bubbles stop Queen's sustain, so Queen is going to find it a lot harder to live in comparison to the Mauga. And I would love to be able to say that the game was nerve-wracking, but then I saw Kellen swap to the Ram on Shambali and I was like, yeah, they cooked. But what exactly can we learn from NRG? Is this a story about how we shouldn't be afraid to step out of the mold? Or perhaps the importance of coaches in the esports scene? One thing for certain, it was an absolute spectacle, and the perfect way to end 2024 for Overwatch fans as a whole.